Going into 2023, there are plenty of drivers that are going to be under pressure to perform because, well, this is Formula 1, so there's always drivers under pressure. But in this video, I'm going to go through my list of drivers that I think are under pressure for various different reasons. It's not always just to kind of keep their seat. Some people need to beat their teammate. Some people need to reaffirm their place within their team and Formula 1. And so, yeah, this is my list of drivers that I think are under pressure going into 2023. The first driver I am going to talk about is actually a driver who on this list is a bit of an outlier because I don't think that he's under pressure for the same reasons as everyone else, and I'll explain that in a second. And the first driver is Carlos Sainz. Now, again, unlike some of the other people on this list, I think he's had a really kind of positive last couple of years. I think he had a great first season at Ferrari in 2021. However, the reason why I think he's under pressure is that certainly when it comes to me, if I knew that Ferrari had a race-winning car and potentially a championship-level car, I really would have expected Carlos Sainz to put up a better fight. I really did think that after all of those fantastic years in the midfield, you know, Carlos Sainz in the McLaren in 2019, 2020, and even in the Ferrari in 2021, he was doing exactly what Alonso was doing last year, exactly what Lando has been doing for the past couple of years. And so I was ready to see Carlos Sainz in a race-winning car up against a quality driver, one of the best on the grid in Charles Leclerc in the other car. And I wanted to see if under that next level of pressure, he would be able to be a proper title challenger in 2022. And ultimately within the first 2 or 3 races, we pretty much got our answer that Carlos Sainz he wasn't ready for that kind of next level of pressure. Now, I do think he grew into the season a lot more, although even towards the latter half of the season, there were some unbelievable kind of disappearance performances. Like I remember in Singapore, Carlos Sainz compared to Leclerc was just nowhere, to be honest. So, but again, that was kind of highlighted with also some really good performances, like again, qualifying in Austin, which I thought was really good. So Carlos Sainz is one of those drivers that I feel like he definitely struggled at the beginning of 2022. He really struggled to adapt to the F175, and it was a tricky car, you know. Even though Leclerc kind of made it look like the best car on the grid at the beginning of the season, that doesn't mean that it wasn't a tricky car. But Carlos Sainz is one of these drivers that, even though he was struggling at the beginning of 2022, unlike someone like Ricciardo, he managed to figure it out with his engineers, with his driving ability, and I think just with his mentality as well. He's really smart. He's a really smart driver, both off track and also in the car as well. He was able to actually do some things better than Leclerc, like dictate the strategy and just, like in Monaco, for example, he did not want to go from wets to inters. He wanted to go straight onto slicks, and dictating the strategy like that is something that I think actually makes him perhaps a little bit more well-rounded than Leclerc, but nowhere near as fast as Charles Leclerc. And as I always say, there is no substitute in Formula 1 for raw speed. So this is why I was kind of disappointed with Carlos, because he's a really well-rounded driver, but he kind of let me down at the beginning of the season, and for the most part, he really did look like just Leclerc's wingman in 2022. So that is why Carlos Sainz is one of the drivers that I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on, to give Mercedes as the example. He needs to show whether he's going to be the George Russell to Lewis Hamilton, or if he's going to be the Valtteri Bottas to Lewis Hamilton. And there is a very, very big difference, because once you do become the number 2 driver and can't quite do it consistently over the course of the entire season, again, under that highest level of pressure, you kind of pigeonhole yourself into being the number 2 driver, and ultimately that's what you become for your entire time. So yes, is Carlos Sainz a genuine title contender in the future, or just a number 2? Now, my next pick is actually going to be a bit of a combination, because it's actually 2 drivers, both of them teammates, who I think, to be honest, are both under pressure to kind of beat each other, and both under pressure in different ways, and that is the Alpine boys. Alain Le Bleu, the French combination, the French duo of Pierre Gasly, the brand new Alpine driver, and Esteban Ocon. I think both of these guys, I think Alpine in general, everything about that team is under pressure with the way that they, especially if Oscarpiastri performs well at McLaren, I think that's just going to raise the pressure even more on Alpine. But the entire organization is under pressure, I think, after the fiasco of 2022, kind of, fumbling both Fernando Alonso and Oscarpiastri. We all know that Pierre Gasly was kind of like their third choice, even though I think Otmar Zafner was trying to, BS his way into saying, yeah, we wanted Pierre Gasly all along. But the reason why both of those drivers are under pressure is because I think certainly from the Esteban Ocon side, this is now, Alpine is Esteban Ocon's team. He managed to fight off Fernando Alonso. I don't think he was better than Fernando Alonso last year, but he was so consistent. He was always there whenever the team needed him. Whenever Fernando had a bad day that was either his fault or, the car's fault, Esteban Ocon was always there. And so I think he's a definitely deserving Formula 1 driver. I think he's one of the best drivers kind of in that midfield, and Alpine is now his team. Fernando's gone, and can he really take that team kind of by the scruff of the neck and make it Esteban Ocon's team with him as the number one driver? Or is Pierre Gasly going to come in and kind of start the second phase of his career? Because after Red Bull didn't work out, after he kind of rejuvenated his career and really restored his reputation at AlphaTauri, it kind of... I think in 2021 and in 2022, it kind of started to stall a little bit. It was like he was almost at that team for a little bit too long, and he was looking for a way out wherever it was. And finally, he made it out, to go to Alpine. He found his way out of AlphaTauri and out of the Red Bull program. But again, how good is Pierre Gasly? Is he better than Esteban Ocon? Because let's not forget, in 2021, and I remember these conversations from F1 fans, there were people who were talking like, potentially Pierre Gasly in 2021 was even better than Lando Norris, the way he was performing in the AlphaTauri. But then unfortunately in 2022, when the AlphaTauri wasn't quite as good, he was not able to adapt. He had a bit of a rough 2022, and I don't think you can really compare him to Yuki, who we're going to talk about a little bit later. So again, Pierre Gasly is coming into kind of this brand new part of his career, and again, he has to kind of beat his teammate to prove that he is on that level with the likes of maybe a Lando Norris, maybe a Carlos Sainz, because otherwise he is just a very decent midfield driver. So both of these drivers are under pressure to kind of beat each other to prove a point in terms of how good they are, both within the team and also just relatively to other drivers as well. And we also know that both of these drivers have big egos as well. Pierre Gasly is going to come into Alpine wanting to prove that in his own team, in his own environment, he is one of the best kind of drivers in the midfield and potentially deserving of a race-winning drive. And as for Esteban Ocon, he's going to want to justify that long-term contract that Alpine gave him a few years ago and kind of assert himself as the number one driver. So yeah, I mean, I've talked about these two guys. I think that is a collision course, by the way, that partnership. We'll see if there's going to be any kind of toxicity or any kind of cracks early on in that partnership. But yes, an all-French lineup as well. I don't know why. Maybe it's just the stereotypes of passionate and emotional French drivers. I could see those two boiling over a little bit. So yeah, I mean, again, both of these two drivers are under pressure in my opinion, but boy, am I excited to see them go head-to-head at Alpine in 2023. The next driver I have on my list is a fairly simple one, and that is Sergio Perez. Ultimately, anyone who's ever been in that second Red Bull seat up alongside Max Verstappen is going to be under pressure. Simple as that. And I think Sergio did a decent job in 2022. I think over the course of the season, Red Bull did have a dominant car because the performance level of a car has always been measured in Formula 1 by what the quickest driver can get out of it. And when you look at what Max had a dominant season, simple as that. So Sergio did have a dominant car, in his hands, and ultimately only finishing third and kind of losing out to Leclerc, especially the way kind of the Ferrari kind of tailed off, especially in the races, although it still had some quali pace even in the kind of the latter half of the season. In the races, it was just nowhere near the RB18. So yeah, for Sergio to not finish second in the championship, I think that did sting the team just a little bit because they got the drivers, they got the constructors as well, and to not get that 1-2. Remember, Red Bull have never had a 1-2 in the championship. I think that did sting just a little bit. Now, Sergio does have a contract for 2023 and also 2024 as well, but I mean, let's be honest, Red Bull driver contracts, they're worth about as much as toilet paper, so he's basically fighting for a seat every single year regardless of what deal he gets because, Red Bull are one of those teams that they can buy him out, not just for next year, but for next race if they feel like there's someone waiting in the wings that potentially could do a better job. So yeah, as a second Red Bull driver to Max Verstappen, you're always going to be under pressure. It's just as simple as that. I mean, Sergio did have a good season, I think, in 2022. He obviously got a few wins. He got some really good results, got, a pole position, which, again, I go back to Jeddah when he got that pole position. I was just like, wow, could this really be the season where Sergio Perez, kind of fights for the title? And ultimately, as the car improved, as Max Verstappen was able to adapt a little bit more and kind of the car was gauged a bit more towards him, and as they found more performance, as the car got a little bit closer to Max, Checo just got a little bit further and further away, and, the pressure did start to mount. So, yeah, I think, again, as I said, there's not too much to say about this one. When you're a second driver at Red Bull, the pressure is always going to be there. It's like that in the past, it's going to be like that in the future, and it's going to be like that until the end of time. Just 2 drivers to go, and first up I have got Oscarpiastri. Now, my previous video was actually a dedicated video around Oscarpiastri, so if you want kind of more in-depth reasoning for why he is going to be my most exciting driver to watch in 2023, and also a bit more about the pressure surrounding him as well, then do go and check that out. I'll have it linked at the very top of the description, so after this video, make sure you go and check that out. But in terms of the big bullet points, in terms of why he's going to be under pressure, I mean, first of all, let's not forget that he is a Formula 3 and Formula 2 champion, and the only other 2 drivers to have done that is Charles Leclerc and George Russell, so he's following in the footsteps of those 2 drivers. And again, when you look at what they went on to achieve, George Russell has just got his first pole position and Grand Prix win. Charles Leclerc was, at the beginning of the season, fighting for a world championship. Both of them, I think, have lived up to the hype, and though that same hype and the same expectations are going to be on Oscar Piastri as well. So the next is obviously having his teammate being Lando Norris. That's going to be big expectations and big pressure as well. Lando is in the form of his life, and ultimately, it's very difficult to judge how good Lando is, because up against Ricciardo, he absolutely dominated him. And I mean, what happens if Lando does the same to Oscar Piastri? Do we say that Oscar is just not good enough for Formula 1? He didn't do a good enough job, or is Lando just that good? So yeah, even having Lando as a teammate is going to be massive, massive pressure. And then ultimately, the biggest reason is the entire Oscar Piastri saga of 2022. Let's keep in mind, McLaren dropped Ricciardo a year early. They are paying his 2023 salary to have him out of the team on the sidelines, and all of that to bring in a rookie in Oscar Piastri, not to be a decent driver, not to do a good job and score a few points there and there. They brought Oscar Piastri in because they think that he is the next big thing, and they brought him in because he needs to be the difference maker at McLaren that will kind of give them the edge over teams like Alpine and Aston Martin as well. That is a huge amount of pressure to put on a rookie, let's not forget, but ultimately, that's just the expectations that comes along with, Oscar Piastri at the moment. So yeah, there is a lot of hype, there is a lot of expectations, and there is a hell of a lot of pressure on Oscar Piastri. But again, like I said in the video before that I did about him, he is the driver I am most excited to see in 2023. And so on to the final driver, and what I will say is that this list is not necessarily ranked, to be brutally honest, but there is a very clear number 1, and it's this driver right here, and that is Yuki Sonoda, undoubtedly the driver under the most pressure in 2023, in my opinion. Oh boy, Yuki, he is hanging on to his Formula 1 career by a thread, in my opinion. He has to perform in 2023, especially with Pierre Gasly, leaving the team. Yuki is now the experienced driver. I'm worried just saying that. I mean, it's just crazy, but yeah, how he's going to do as kind of the number 1 driver at AlphaTauri, up against, in my opinion, a very, very difficult teammate. De Vries might be going into his rookie Formula 1 season, but he's 27 years old. He's a very good and already very accomplished racing driver, a Formula 2 champion, a Formula E champion. He raced for the Mercedes team, so he knows what it's like to be under the pressure of a big team and to perform under those expectations. I think, physically, he's not going to underestimate the demands of what it's going to take to be a Formula 1 driver, in the same way that I think a lot of those kind of, hurdles kind of tripped up Yuki Sonoda when he made his debut. So, De Vries might be coming in as a rookie, but I think he's going to be one of the most prepared rookies we've ever seen, especially in recent kind of Formula 1. So that is going to be a tough teammate for Yuki Sonoda. And ultimately, if he doesn't beat Nick De Vries in his rookie season, I mean, we all know, or maybe we don't, but I think that Yuki Sonoda has a huge amount of raw speed and raw talent, and I did see him progress in 2022, even though the car kind of, took a step backwards, but there was still loads of silly mistakes, crashing out of the pits in Canada, crashing into his teammate in Silverstone, which in the end, by the way, cost Max Verstappen the British Grand Prix win, but no one was talking about that, thankfully. So there's still a lot of those little mini mistakes, and ultimately, whilst there were some good results, he didn't score a lot of points either way. So yeah, there is still a good driver in Yuki, and he has developed as a driver and as a person. He's a lot more kind of calm compared to his rookie season, but I think next year he needs to take an even bigger jump up. He needs to prove that he can be better than an accomplished racing driver like Nick de Vries, and he also, and this is the bit that I think is going to be super challenging for him, he needs to prove that he can be the leader of AlphaTauri, also lead the development of the car. You know, he's got to do all of that whilst also performing on the track, and if he doesn't, there is a whole shed load of Red Bull Junior drivers in Formula 3 and Formula 2 that, you know, want to be in Formula 1, that want to be exactly where Yuki Sonoda is. We know Red Bull, we know the Red Bull program. It is sink or swim. Yuki is going into his 3rd season in Formula 1, and ultimately he's got to perform. He's had all of the time in the world, and now, you know, he's had all the time to develop as well as a driver and as a person, and in 2023, it's going to be time to deliver. Otherwise, in 2024, he's going to be out. Well, there you have it. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comments box below in terms of which drivers you think are the most under pressure in 2023. And if you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to subscribe. That would be massively, massively appreciated. And I'll see you in the next one.